Dr. Matthew Dunn is with us, and he's going to talk about what's knowledge now, literacy, media, and the data explosion. And if you don't think the words data explosion are a reality, just think about the possibility of someone in a remote African village connecting to satellite and hooking up to all the information you have available to you in your home or business via the internet. That's a little bit of a change, huh? That's an explosion. And when the access to knowledge and knowledge itself is moving at an exponential rate, maybe we need to start thinking differently about how we view this new reality. So, Matthew Dunn has a PhD, and it's the first ever PhD in digital media, which he himself designed at the University of Washington in 1990. He's had a widely varied career: a theater professor, a 9-year Microsoft veteran, big company chief information officer, and startup CEO. He's also an award-winning writer, a designer, director, and frequent speaker, an inventor with some 15 patents to date. He co-founded and launched Say It Visually, a local firm, with a business partner in September 2008, landing numerous Fortune 100 companies and growing to 5 employees at this point. He moved his young family here to Bellingham in 1997 and has been actively involved in the community in numerous ways over the years. Please welcome with me Dr. Matthew Dunn.
We are replacing the system of knowledge that all of us learned in, grew up in, arguably that our country, the Western Civ, was founded on, right? We are replacing system of knowledge based on primarily print with digital. And we've done it at an astonishing pace. I'll start with the context of the pace of that change and then try and unfold some of the unexpected ramifications of that professionally, personally, nationally, and so on. Is there a little risk of being high-tech? Hey, cool, it works. Can't see it, but it works fine. About 2 months ago, the Encyclopedia Britannica, dimly represented on the screen up there, stopped publishing encyclopedias. Who had encyclopedia set in the house as a kid? Whose grandkids are going to look up stuff in a paper encyclopedia? Yeah. Okay, we're halfway there. You think about that. 167 years continuous run, starting with the sort of volume like this and growing to that shelf. I did hear one critic say that paper encyclopedias were never really used, they were just aspirational furniture. That's a good line. Wish I could take credit for it. We are replacing paper with screens. But the thing I want to explore, drill into, give you some background to today is what that really means. What's different about a screen with color and motion and speakers attached and the world's entire network somewhere behind it? What's different about that from the sort of fixed, authoritative, once-a-year Encyclopedia Britannica? First, let's look at some surprising and scary numbers. And there was no way to get this data charted in a way you could see in the back of the room, so I'll give you the verbal description as best I can. This is a visual I sort of cribbed and redid from the Wall Street Journal. Left end of that is it's even tiny on here, 1986. 1986, most of the world's information was still in analog form, still on paper, on tape, things like that. It'll help if you put in your head an image of a nice big library. I always think Sizzalo Library down at UW, just so cool to hang out in. But libraries, right? An unbelievable number of books. You'll never get to them. You'll never read them all. And you take all of the libraries that we had in the world in 1986, and the teeny tiny figure here says that was the equivalent of 2.62 billion gigabytes of information. And at that point, it's 86. I remember 86. 0.02 billion gigabytes of digital information. That's 20 terabytes. There's at least 20 terabytes of information on the phones in this room right now, just for context, okay? The top line there, the brown line, is the analog getting skinnier really, really, really fast. We hit an inflection point about 2001, and by the time we get to 2007, the right end of that diagram, analog had grown dramatically. A lot more analog information, 19,000 billion gigabytes, but digital had grown to 276,000 billion gigabytes. As of 2007, 96% of the world's information was digital and 4% analog. All those libraries you have in your head, they're still there, but the explosion of information in digital form has dwarfed it, and that's just the warm-up. Yeah, there's no way you're going to read that. Let me give you a different one, easier to read. That's today. The square in the center, 1%. 1%. 1% of the world's information is now in analog form. 99% of the world's information is now in digital form. And we can discuss at length how much is information and how much is noise, but just the cold, hard storage fact is we're at 99% digital now. And the figure is just scary. It's 1,800,000 billion gigabytes. It's 1.8 petabytes. No, wait, sorry, zettabytes. We're in zettabytes there. It's a big number. And the trend line gets worse. This is the projection to 2020. So not that far from now, we'll be at 35 zettabytes, 35 million billion gigabytes of digital information, and 0.02% of the information in the world will be in paper form. Zettabyte, oh man, he asked me what power of 10 is a zettabyte. I honestly can't remember. It's just got a heck of a lot of zeros behind it. It's like a terabyte of terabytes. It's millions on millions. It's a really big number. So what are we going to do? It's not like libraries got smaller. But all of that paper is now squeezed into that 0.02%. Maybe there's more to read these days. You think? So here's the quote. Don stole this from me. I'm really not happy with him for that. Ray Kurzweil, I stole it from Ray Kurzweil's Fair is Fair. A kid in Africa has access to more information today, now, than the President of the United States did 15 years ago. Yeah, that southern gent on the left, 15 years ago. A kid in Africa with a cell phone in their hand has access to more information, can get to more in an hour, can get to more in 5 minutes than the President of the U.S. could get to 15 years ago. Wow. What are we going to do? All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, maybe an unexpected shift. Talk about first sort of statistical basis, what is that information? What kind of information are we talking about? Are we talking about 99.8% text and books? No. There's a lot of digital information that's textual, that's like a book. But most of it anymore is not text, is not words that you're intended to read. Yet another impossible to read chart, but this one goes out to, 2010. The pink on the bottom this is internet traffic, and it's about a 20-year time span. The pink on the bottom is internet traffic as a percentage. That's worldwide web pages, web traffic, okay? You notice that it got really big, and you notice it's gotten surprisingly a lot smaller. This is 2010, so that's 2 years old on the right edge. You see the blue wedgie up at the top that's getting kind of big? That's video, which as of 2010 comprised 50% of the traffic on the internet. As of 2010, video. Cisco's latest projection, Cisco's a big network switch company. A lot of the internet runs through their boxes. Cisco's projection is by 2015, 90% of the traffic on the internet will be video. 90%. Yeah, big numbers, exploding really, really fast. Okay, interesting. Vexed by projectors. Let's see if this scrolls. This is a science experiment. There's an iPad tucked in under the projector. You don't see a notebook computer there. I wanted to see if I could make this work. This is my 60-second slide, which is not going to work. I'll have to recite it for you. What happens in 60 seconds out in the world of media? And this one is a set of social media. Who's heard of YouTube? Okay, at least some of you laughed. Come on. Who's watched stuff on YouTube? Who's watched stuff on YouTube on your phone? Okay, let's broaden this a little bit. Who has a purse or a wallet? Who's got a cell phone? Who's got a cell phone that you'd call a smartphone? Interesting. Interesting. What do we keep those smartphone hands up, please? Thank you. What are we at? A little over 50%? Ballpark? A little over 50%? Okay, interesting. Interesting. Like this has a screen, can do things besides let you talk to someone else, which is what we used to do with telephones, right? And you can read things on these, and you can look at web pages on these, and you can watch video on these, which people are doing more and more and more, and that's actually going to explode really fast. The chart that you're not going to get to look at there is a list of the places that people go on the internet to consume different forms of media. The upstart is a social network called Pinterest. Who's heard of Pinterest? Okay, interesting. Some marketing guy at Pinterest is really happy right now because that company is 2 years old and it's going like this. So in 60 seconds, which is longer than I've been talking about the slide you can't see, some of the stuff that happens on social media is like 750,000 Facebook page views. But the shocker stat is that in 60 seconds, there'll be 2 million videos watched on YouTube. 2 million videos watched on YouTube. Kind of crazy. And in 60 minutes, there'll be 3 days of additional content uploaded to YouTube. 60 minutes, time you're spending at lunch, 3 days more stuff to watch, uploaded. And that number doubled in 6 months, give or take. It's just going up and up, and I'll think this. What are we gonna do? Yeah, I don't know. That's a chart of Pinterest, which is, Pinterest is a social networking site where people share images, in a nutshell, with each other. Here's a picture that I found. Here's a visual that I like. Gee, I like the visuals that guy posts. I will take a look at them whenever he posts them. That's what Pinterest is in a nutshell. Interestingly enough, predominantly female user base. It's very skewed, in fact. A lot more girls than guys on Pinterest. But 2 years flat, that thing is spiked like this. Interesting. We didn't know we liked to share pictures so much. So, who's on Facebook? That's sort of guilty, shameful. Okay, I'm on Facebook. Not often. By far, the thing that is shared the most, share with your friends. By far, the thing that's shared the most on Facebook is visuals, pictures, and videos. We like sharing that stuff with each other. Why? Let's come back to that question. Yeah, there's the scary YouTube stats. No, 60 seconds, 60 hours. I was wrong. I was wrong by a whole order of magnitude. 60 seconds, 60 hours of video are uploaded. So you can now do that scary gasp again about how much YouTube content there is. In 7 days, the equivalent of 200,000 full-length feature films are uploaded to YouTube. In 60 days, there'll be more video uploaded to YouTube than ABC, NBC, and CBS created in 60 years. And this is an audience that actually remembers those three networks, like me. 92 billion videos watched a month worldwide. 4 billion page views per day. Big numbers. What are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And it's not all, much of it is, but it's not all videos of cats doing funny things. There's a lot of that. There's too much of that. And there's no such thing as quality control. Anyone can upload almost anything. But there was an incident about 6 months ago where an organization created a 60-minute long feature film about a very bad guy in Africa, Joseph Kony. You might have. And again, you can't read it, but I can. In 2 weeks flat, this 60-minute film was watched by 104 million people. In 2 weeks flat. Wow. I'm not sure there have been many television shows that have gotten that kind of viewership, and it's not like they had a bazillion-dollar marketing and promotion budget. My point in putting the Kony reference in here is that although there are lots of cat things on YouTube and other video and content sites, there's serious subject matter as well, and useful subject matter as well. It's not all just cats. I have teenage sons, and we live in the woods in Sudden Valley. So I decided that they really, really needed paintball guns to have some fun in the woods, because I want to play too. And so I bought some paintball guns, off Amazon, of course. And we're looking at them saying, what do we do? Never had a paintball gun before. Like, literally, what do I do? Take the paper user's manual out, and it explains a couple of things in terse translated English about what to do. But I had this like, I think there's more to it than that. Where do I turn? So, having teenage males in the house, I said, Dad, just look on YouTube. So, typed in the model name of the paintball guns that we'd gotten. There's a nice 5-minute long, there's the camera running, here's how to field strip and oil and prep a new blah, blah, blah model such and such paintball gun. Like the guy had taken his camera, and he clearly knew this thing inside and out. You know, you'd undo this bolt and then this bolt and set them here and keep track of them. It was extraordinarily useful. Amount of money the company paid for that content to be created, zero, right? It made their product considerably more valuable to me. I know how to take the thing apart now. I know that I prepped it properly. I could see what connects to what. I made the boys do the other ones so that they learned that as well. But that's actually an extraordinary thing, that resource was sitting there, that the guy volunteered his time and he got a social return on that. Okay, you with me? He posted that because he likes his paintball gun and he wanted to get a video on YouTube that people would watch, and probably his friends would say, oh, you did a cool video on a paintball gun. It was very useful to us. It was useful to him. Google AdWords is subsidizing the infrastructure required to put that video up there, so he didn't pay and we didn't pay and the paintball company didn't pay. This is a really different economy that I'm describing, right? So a side note off of the paintball gun story. If you are in some sort of business now, you need to think about not just media that you can produce. If you're in some sort of business, you're in the media business. If you're in some sort of business, you are in the publishing business, period. Even if you're not in business, if you're in the public sector, you're in the publishing business. We have a worldwide platform. everyone's an author, everyone's a consumer, period. But what you need to think about is, who else wants to publish about your stuff? Because if that paintball gun company encouraged that, that's only going to help their sales. It's only going to actually improve the things that they produce. Why? They'll find out more about it. They'll get to see how someone actually uses it. It would have been a $1,000 project if they decided to do that themselves. It would have. Oh, we need to hire a video company and they're going to strip the gun and make sure it's well lit and all that other stuff. And this guy's, I know how to take this apart. This is a video camera, right? If you've got a smartphone in your pocket, guess what? You have a movie studio in your pocket and a recording studio in your pocket. I've got editing software. I can edit videos on my phone. I never use it. It's just kind of cool that I can. But the point is that I can. And if you see 14-year-olds, particularly 14-year-old girls for some reason, when they get together, you know what they do? They make videos. It's a native language for them. It's kind of cool. So what's the point I'm driving to about media against the backdrop of that astonishing explosion in data? We can't read it all. We never could when print and publishing dominated. Right? We never could read it all. Well, some of us wanted to. I mean, I like libraries a lot, but it's like, I can't read all the books in the library. Now it's so far out of our grasp that the stuff that we even should read personally and professionally, we don't get to. Honest reaction. Does the way you read, has that changed from what it felt like 20 years ago? Does it feel different? Yes? I see a few heads nodding. I feel it, and I'm the biggest fan of the book there is. I love to read. But I'm like, skim, scan, skip over, highlight, I'll get back to that later, rush through it, catch the high points. Average time spent on a web page is 28 seconds, and that's a generous estimate. Companies spend a lot of money on their homepage. Yeah, got it, gone. They're not reading it. They're not reading it. Here's the point I'm driving to. I think we're having to communicate with each other in new/old ways because the form of communication that this was really good at, serial language, sequential language, doesn't scale. There's too much of it. Who honestly keeps up with their professional reading? Raise your hand, I'm going to call you a big fibber. You can't. You can't. Who keeps up with a casual, gee, I'm interested in that, I should read that, read? No, you don't, I don't. And I read a lot, and you probably read a lot too, or you wouldn't be here today, right? But you actually, it's very hard to keep up with it. Okay, why? What doesn't work about serial language on a page? It does things nothing else can do. But this thing is flaking out a little bit. But it's slow. It's slow. And it puts a heavy load on memory. Right? You reach page 1, page 2, page 3. You get to page 4. You have to have remembered what you read on page 1 to relate those two things. I mean, it sounds like an utterly trivial observation, but really it's not. It takes a lot of processing power. It takes a lot of the scarcest commodity of all in the face of that digital onslaught, which is attention. We don't actually pay attention very well. Why? It's too much. There's too much hitting us. Way too much hitting us. So like, I'm going to sit and methodically read a 20-page white paper on social media marketing. Baloney, right? I'm not going to be able to concentrate for that length of time. I mean, I might be able to once or twice a day. There's hundreds of those that are waiting for me to read them. There are hundreds of policy papers for my buddies from the public sector there that you're supposed to read. The regulations you're supposed to know and understand. You're going, don't have time to get through it all. It's tough. So now we're reaching for different ways to be effective in communicating with each other. And I would argue that those statistics about video and images and music, which is a whole other ballgame, say to me, say to us, that we're thinking, well, this works in a different way. And maybe it's effective, it being visual communication, narrative communication. Maybe that's effective for some subjects in ways that sequential language can't be. Who says I'm a visual learner? Who said that about themselves? I learn visually. I like things visually. Okay, y'all a bunch of fibbers, because the statistic is 80% according to the American Psychological Association. Most people are actually predominantly visual, right? Visual, auditory, kinesthetic learners. Most people are predominantly visual. If I could give you a good coherent picture of fill in the blanks, you're more likely to get it, you're more likely to get it faster, and you're more likely to remember it than if I ask you to read the data or the facts behind it in sequential language. You just are. Like, it's how we're wired. It's actually something like 80% of our cognitive processing power is devoted to what's coming in through our eyes. And a lot less of it is devoted to what's coming in through our ears. Who is the former teacher? I'm sure, I'm sure you've had that experience, right? They don't remember what you say no matter how many times you say it. Hang on a second. Okay, I said new/old. That's a page from Galileo's manuscript where that crafty guy said, hey, we can point a telescope at the sky. Cool. And what's interesting about that manuscript is that he does something there that kind of disappeared for hundreds and hundreds of years afterwards. He mixes language and pictures freely. He's got the little, you see it sort of halfway down towards the right there, you see a little scribble sketch of planets and moons. Galileo's taking notes as he looks through the telescope, and to him the logical, natural way to convey what he wanted to convey was to describe it in language. Oh, and why should I describe, this to the right and that to the left? I'll just draw a picture of it. And fortunately, the way things were published for him, they reproduced that. Okay? Then when we started putting type in little lines and going stamp, stamp, it got hard to include pictures. It got hard to include visuals, and we stopped being visual in our predominant form of communication, right? Most of the books on your shelf, most of the books on my shelf don't have much visual information, and if they do, it's a second-class citizen at best, right? Illustrations at the back, or the occasional color plate included. It's certainly not an equal opportunity form of communication in the printed book. Now, what about the screen in your pocket? What about the screen in your living room? What about the screen on your desk? There, we don't actually have that restriction, hereditary restriction of type going in lines. We go, you want pictures? Easy. You want moving pictures? No problem. You want sound? No problem. Oh, full color. Great. It's not the same media. That's the Starry Messenger as printed. Galileo's Starry Messenger. Note, they included his sketches. Why? Not because he was in charge, but because that was the best way to convey it. So the publisher felt at the time. And I think this is pre all this minutiae, so there's probably no page numbers on that book. Yeah, I don't think there is. Interesting. Okay, this is a cool book. 1847, The Elements of Euclid. I'm holding a reproduction right here. This very interesting Irish guy said, the best way to teach people math is with pictures. And as a matter of fact, we've studied this, and we determined that people will learn the principles of Euclidean geometry in 1/3 the time if they're looking at pictures that are designed to convey that information instead of reading about it. 1847. And I'll leave this up here. You should flip through it afterwards. It's gorgeous. All the pages look like this. Isn't that cool? Yeah, it's just dramatic, and it's kind of this little hideout in the history of publishing. Like I don't know how he got it published, and it didn't get picked up for that long, and it wasn't a bestseller or anything. We just go, oh, that's great. We didn't do much of that. We really didn't. Now, maybe we're starting to have to do some of this because there's more than we'll actually ever read in sequential language form. There is no way this is going to make any sense to you. Pity, it was really great on a nice high-res projector up at the university. This is a depiction of the food web of the Atlantic cod. You didn't think you were going to learn about that today, did you? So every one of those lines is a connection between something that eats something else. Okay? Something that eats something else. You know, the cod eats this, or the cod is eaten by that. That's what a food web is, right? It's not a real trivial point. There's an amazing amount of information on that one page. It would take a heck of a big book to print all of those cross relationships out, and you'd never read it, neither would I, and you wouldn't remember it by the time you got to page 16. But if you're a guy who's studying monk seals and you say, well, if our monk seal population declines, what's the impact going to be? You'll look at this and go, oh, it's going to affect that, it's going to affect this, second order of magnitude, it's going to affect that. Wow, cool. And it's one page. It's one page. All right, good trade mics, thanks. Better, a little better, a little less flaky. Okay, this is totally gratuitous. Jot this down, Google Art Project. This is what we're doing with screens. I love the companies that are on top of their game who have enough funds to do really silly stuff that we all benefit from. Google has trotted around to an amazing number of world-class museums and done incredibly high-res digitization of a bunch of paintings, including Starry Night, Van Gogh. And okay, anyone can go on image search and find a little picture of Starry Night. That's a zoom in. This is the level of detail you get. That's a full screen zoom in of that little fried egg by the cypress tree on the bottom center left. That's how close you can go. If you're interested in painting, if you like art, this is just a feast, because it's a long trip to get to all these museums. And you could look at it on this, or you could look at it on the thing on your desk, or you could look at it on your television and learn stuff. And it's not in text form, which is really cool. Google Art Project. I highly recommend it. If you're an art teacher or if you know an art teacher, make sure they know about this. Make sure they use it. What an amazing resource. One other thing I wanted to touch on, especially interesting for this audience, just demographically. Probably not a lot of hardcore computer gamers in the room, right? Myself included. That's a shot from Wizards of Warcraft, I think. There was a study about learning organizations. Like the imperative for an organization today, business or otherwise, is to be really good at knowledge acquisition, at learning. And the study said the most effective learning organizations they could find aren't actually in the military, although the military guys are really, really good, are actually these voluntary guilds, these voluntary cooperative groups on World of Warcraft. They're amazingly good at learning. Completely voluntary, completely virtual. Like they're all scattered all over, probably all over the world. They don't know each other except by their game handle. But they get together, cooperate to try to win what they're after. They have after-action reviews and say, you did this, you could have done that, next time we'll do this differently. And their rate of improvement at what they do is fantastic. Like businesses should be so good. You know, government organizations should be so good at learning, and it's strictly voluntary. Fascinating. I My point is that the world these guys are, and I mean world literally in this case, the world they're inhabiting, the world they're gaming in and playing in, is this complete on-the-screen synthetic construct. Like they're looking at a virtual, cartoonish, if you will, world with objects and attributes and actions that they have to learn. It's totally visual, right? Motion and visual, and it doesn't prevent them being effective. In fact, they're more effective, measurably more effective. 86% of the stock trades made in the U.S. today are done by computers to other computers. 86%. Yeah, that one shocked me. The intersection with this line of thought about media and the overload of information and visual is this. If you don't think the guys working at those high-speed trading desks have gaming experience, I do. They have to. How else can they be that fast at decision-making and processing? And if you've ever seen pictures of stock traders, what do they have around them? Many screens, right? Usually like 6 at least. Why? So they can see as much stuff as possible, as quickly as possible. Because they can intake and work on visual patterns far faster. They're not going to sit and read the company K1 prospectus and make a decision. They don't have time. They don't have time. They're comparing too many things at once, too quickly, very much in a visual form. And I remember reading somewhere that if you want to go work on the street in New York, you better sharpen up your gaming chops, because that's actually part of the interview process now, is what computer games are you good at? Yeah. So when your kid or grandkid is playing a game, you're like, stop wasting time on that game. They're actually maybe training for a job that doesn't exist yet, but will actually need the skills that they're quite good at. They're literate. You know I'd get to that. They're literate about this form. I'm like barely literate. I spend a little time. I played Doom when it came out, and I've got teenage boys, so I watch them do it, limited amount. But they're literate at this, and to dismiss it lightly is, I think, an enormous mistake, an enormous trivialization. The gaming industry is far bigger than the movie industry. I don't know if you knew that. Computer games are much bigger, revenue-wise, much bigger industry than Hollywood movies. There's hundreds of millions of dollars into creating a first-class gaming title. And to say, it's just juvenile entertainment, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that we should dismiss it that lightly. I watch kids do this and think, they're quick. They're really something at adapting to this and at making sense of it and making decisions in these spaces. And man, that's a good skill set. They'll probably end up using that skill set for other things in the future. Yeah, I don't encourage my kids to spend 20 hours a day on games. No, I don't, by choice. They do some, they don't do some. But my wife and I deliberately said, they need to have the shot at being literate at this. So it's not, let's take away the gaming console for their whole life. It's, okay, it's one of many things you can do. My older one prefers his guitar, and I'm grateful, but anyway. Okay, so we talked about visuals at length. Let me lay a story on you. Just over 100 years ago, a steamship sailed out into the Atlantic. Finest luxury liner of its day, packed with wealthy people. It went down at sea. And the first ship-to-shore telegraph asking for help came from that ship. What do you think the name of the ship is? Wrong. 2 years earlier, the Republic sailed out of the U.S., got rammed, sunk. The ship-to-shore telegraph enabled them to save almost everybody. Almost everybody. Kind of cool, right? You never heard of it, and I never heard of it until I was researching this material. Like, Republic, what's that? Yeah, and it was the predecessor, in a sense, to the Titanic. I mean, it was the luxury liner of the day. But what the Republic didn't have going for it was the story. You didn't know it because it's a library stat, right? Oh yeah, another ship sunk, whatever. And interestingly enough, I expected the override. I had the override in my head about the first ship-to-shore telegraph being from the Titanic. It wasn't. It was from these guys 2 years earlier. The reason the Titanic had a telegraph was because it worked. In the case of the Titanic, they actually had standardized the code asking for help, which these guys didn't have. As a result of this accident, they said, let's all agree on how to spell help in Morse code, CQD, if I recall right. But the Titanic has the story that's gotten imprinted, that you all know, right? And a big budget story at that. I'll make two arguments, okay? One, the Titanic is a better story because they died, to be really blunt about it. It's kind of the Jim Morrison thing. And two, it was a really great movie, and it's really hard to forget. So when I say yada yada ship, went down at sea, Atlantic, telegraph, your brain goes, click, Titanic. No argument there. I'd have said exactly the same thing, right? Why? Because story is an integral, primal way of structuring the world, and we're really good at it. We're really good at it, and we're really good at remembering it. If I asked you about your vacation last summer, what are you going to do? You're not going to rattle off stats and facts. You're going to tell me a story about a piece of the experience that captures it or characterizes it for you. And you won't remember the exact details, but you'll remember the essential sequence of actions and emotions. We're good at that. We're wired for that. And now we're actually starting to use it. It's a fascinating phenomenon. What's old is new again, right? I do this for a living now, which is fun. Like, help us tell our story, says company A, B, C, D, and E. Literally, that's what we hear from them. We need help telling our story. People don't understand us. Help us tell our story. And they mean a lot of stuff by that, but part of what they mean by that is how do we get across the essence of our business or product or service or department or whatever? How do we get across the essence of that in a way that will actually stick in people's heads with all the competition from those gazillions of zettabytes of stuff that's right there in their face? And we're getting back to what are people inherently good at? We're inherently good at telling stories and at remembering stories. It's a way of structuring the world. You know, if you can do that for a company or a product or a cause or a service, you're much more likely to stick. The guys that did the Joseph Kony YouTube film, in a sense, said, you know what, we need to make this story stick. If we just put out the facts about this guy, no one will ever care. They won't read the white paper. But if we can bring the story to life, which they were very deliberate about crafting, then it will get recalled. So, another quote you can't read. There are nearly as many bits of information in the digital universe as stars in our physical universe. And it's more than doubling every 2 years. We're going to have to relearn how to tell stories to each other and how to pull out the crayons and draw pictures to make our point. Because we can't write it all and read it all. We can't. We can't keep up. And that's not just for personal, that's for professional communication as well. I would argue strenuously that whatever you do, if you can be more effective at communicating what you need to communicate, you're gonna win, right? Your company's gonna be better, your cause is going to be advanced. And if you keep to just language, just what we used to do, I don't think it'll get remembered, processed, understood, recalled, or acted on in the same way. So I will stop there. My trusty assistants will do Q&A with the mic. Cool.
We have one here. Yeah, and as you know, if we can get the lights back there, please, that would be helpful. And questions from members with badges. First here, and then we'll go back this way. Chuck and Bill are here. And remember, it's question with a question mark at the end, not explanation or anything else. So let's go.
One question. Will we reach a saturation point, and where is our safety valve? It worries me.
Worries me too. When we reach the saturation point, where's our safety valve? We're way past saturation. In terms of text, my question about reading, I'm way past saturation, right? And I'm resorting to sample, skim, get by with it. And you're starting to see some symptoms of maybe this is not totally a good idea. I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a company in Europe that as of next year has banned email between employees. I applaud as well. Like, yeah, great decision. Why? It's a horrible, ineffectual medium for communication. He wrote this, and I'm not sure what he meant, so I wrote back, and then the guy, 8 messages later, is reading the thing bottom up, try to make sense of that. Couldn't be a stupider design for communication than that, right? But that's what we've been stuck with, we've been using. Makes companies incredibly, incredibly ineffective. Safety valve? I don't know. I suspect that in 10 years, maybe 20 years, we're going to look at what we're doing now as the equivalent of pollution, if you will. Right? We're wasting our attention. And we're assuming the other guy's got time and attention to pay, so we're sloppy about it ourselves. Professional opinion. I get paid to do this, right? Like, you guys are hiring me because I'll take the time to be clear and succinct, and you can't take the time, and it's your subject matter. What's wrong with this picture? Right? So we'll have to cope. It's not like we've got a choice. But I actually think the other answer to your question is that we're going to start legitimizing crayons again. Seriously. I watched my sons go from I like to draw to I kind of forgot how to I can't. And most of you went through that arc as well, right? Oh, I can't draw. I did too. Okay, I did too. Oh, I can't draw. Baloney. Everybody can draw. Right? And I'm not making the point about artistic drawing. I'm making the point about communicating in a form besides language. We're going to have to figure out how to enable people to hang on to that skill, which every 5-year-old has, by the way, because we'll need to be able to do it to keep up with the growth. Did that answer your question, ma'am? Yeah.
I just got done reading The Shallows.
Yeah, Nick Carr.
A while ago, anyway. And he makes the point that the internet use is literally changing our brains. Mm-hmm. And although some parts of our brains and our skills are strengthening, one ability that we're losing is deep thinking.
Yep.
Can you comment on that, or will you comment on that?
Yeah. He's referring to Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows. There's a good opposing viewpoint from Clay Shirky. Yes, the screens and connection to the world are changing how we think, communicate, act. No doubt it's rewiring our brains. If you could have taken a time machine back just post-Gutenberg, when almost nobody was literate, you probably could have made an argument that this print stuff was changing our brains and the way we talked and communicated and interacted and the way we systematized knowledge. Turns out we gained a little by the invention of print. Snap argument on my part. I don't think we're going to be able to reverse the trend. I do think we're going to have to decide and invent the decision and coping mechanisms. There are companies that are now saying, turn the screen off for an hour a day, for example. Why? Concentrate, dummy. Right? You're actually paid to think, not just to type. So we'll probably start figuring out how to respond to that, how to grapple with it. But I think that rise, like the Pinterest chart I showed you, I think that rise in visual and narrative communication is an aspect of that Nick Carr, I don't think he quite picked up on that. I really don't. I think he was a little anchored in a text world in the onslaught he's talking about. And we'll also invent technical filtering mechanisms. I use a news app called Zeit on my iPad and my phone. And its job is to go find the news that, roughly speaking, I said I was interested in, because looking for it is a big pain and takes too much of my attention. So I've actually ceded some of that job to a machine. I'm losing something there, and I'm gaining something there, for sure. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
So I'm going to quickly read this as an example. This is from someone at the White House. It says, U, letter U, R, letter R, correct CRT about POTUS, which stands for President of the United States. It goes on like this. I have a concern. Well, I won't say it, but yeah. I have a concern that sentence structure and grammar is going out the window. And a few years ago it was that, you know, you would get a text from a kid or somebody else and it was a text, so it was okay. But now that same shorthand is showing up in emails. And so my question to you is twofold. Does it matter? And the second thing for me is what happens to the written word? Because I still think that there's real power in writing somebody a letter. And I'll tell you, with my mindset, I'm totally overwhelmed 90% of the time. Sorry to admit that, you guys. But the reality is, when I get a written letter, I actually do stop and read it. So it would seem that that still has a difference. Will it in the future?
Yeah, well, you come up here. No, right on the mark is a set of questions. There was an article, Wall Street Journal, Saturday, about grammar going to hell in a handbasket, basically. Inside companies, and example after example, you're just going, ooh, like this, ouch. And yes, people are using short text chunks. The cost of that, the damage of that, I think, is even more ambiguity where clarity is needed. You look at email threads, and what you mostly see is people trying to sort out what the other guy meant. Why? Because you didn't write very well in the first place, right? And it's easier to reply and add to the train than to stop, rethink it, summarize it clearly, and say, this is what everyone's trying to get to. Unfortunately, you know, English has doubled in the last 100 years. We're now at 1 million+ words in the English language, right? And you can try like heck to be articulate and literate, but you're going to be grappling with people who write the way you described. I don't know an easy answer to it. If I were, sorry, let me give you two quick answers. One, in the company I run, I'm kind of a Nazi about clear writing because it's what we do, communicate clearly. It's like that's our stock in trade. If you're not clear, rewrite it. And I've got a visual artist who can't spell to save her life. She's getting better. Like we're investigating it. We're investing in that. The second one is this, though. This is a conundrum to throw back at you. How can we all get outraged about language literacy, grammatical literacy, and not be equally outraged about the complete paucity of visual literacy that we've been allowing for generations?
Sure. Zeta byte is 10 to the 21st power.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. My question is, to what extent do you think this restructuring of the way the brain works, the utilization of visual imaging as a substitute for former means of gathering information has contributed to the really fundamental ineffectiveness of government in the Western world and the polarization of politics, not just in the United States, but pretty much universally. Do you think that there's a correlation?
I'm not sure I'd use the word substitute because my Food Network of the Cod is a pretty clear argument that that's a better choice of tool for that particular communication problem than text would have been. Leave that aside. We're trying to cope with the problem you described when you see motions and directives like insistence on the use of clear language, right? Like there's legislation about that. Stop obfuscating so much. And there's actually studies that say, guess what? You actually save a lot of money on both sides and stress on both sides with a clear, readable by human beings insurance policy or policy directive, whatever else. Unfortunately, I don't think bills have gotten any shorter. Do you? No. I honestly don't know an easy answer to that. My bias would be that we're going to start insisting on additional or other ways of being clear, because I don't think the issue set is getting simpler. I think the issue set is getting more complicated, and language is getting a little bit overloaded and creaky at trying to grapple with it. Right? And piling on more words doesn't actually mean clearer. It's been attributed to Jefferson and I forget who else, but I'm sorry to write you a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one, right? That quote. There it is right there. But in the face of that data deluge, I don't know a good answer aside from keep trying. Yeah, sorry.
I don't know if you want to deal with this, a little change of direction, but what do you think the implications of this media explosion are on the electricity grid?
Oh, good question. That's a good one. 10 to 15% of our electricity is used by digital devices now. Number's going up. However, they've gotten more efficient at their use of electricity at an amazing rate, right? Moore's Law has benefits there. The iPad running that presentation uses $1.60 worth of electricity a year total to be powered, right? I put no carbon footprint on the traffic grid here. My commute is down a flight of steps. And I would bet that my net energy consumption is dramatically lower by not driving to an office than it would be if I drove to an office in town. So I don't know if those two things are counterbalancing each other. I do know that traffic has dropped in the U.S. I do know that electricity consumption has actually dropped in the U.S. as well, even though we've got more digital devices being plugged in. The shift to what's called cloud computing, where basically more stuff is centralized in a nutshell, may help that. Ironically and interestingly, the absolute leader at power-efficient computers is Facebook. They've like perfected this, and they actually did what's called open source. They said, here's how we build the computers that run, the many, 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 many computers that run Facebook. Here's how we built it, right down to the bolts and nuts. Knock yourselves out. Please build them this way. Why? Because it's going to save power, cooling, all of that other stuff. Yeah. I suspect the trend line for individual devices is good, but the number of devices is going up like a skyrocket. Anyone actually know what all the little AC adapter wall warts in your house are for? I lost track a long time ago. What is this, man? And it's in the wall sucking power. Yeah. Yes, it's a trade-off like this, but more and more people are working, quote unquote, from home, and for sure, that's saving power. For sure. Right? My house is on and powered even if I'm in the office, so is yours.
I wanted to reference the diagram you had about the cod.
Yeah.
And I, as a consumer, understand how I can get that information by looking at it. My question is, what is the skill set that's necessary to create that diagram? And who are the people who do that?
I'm so glad you asked that. For sure, there's expertise involved, knowledge involved in mapping those relationships. Someone had to observe, whoa, gray seals eat cod. Let's write that down. I was just having a conversation with John Mishner from the Port of Bellingham this morning, and I said, because they gave a great presentation about what the work they're doing in economic development in the county, and I said, you know, if we asked the CFOs and accountants at local companies, what other local companies do you do business with? Just give me a one-to-one pairing. You know, we here at RiseX do a lot of stuff with this company, this company, this company, this company. That set of pairs can be dropped into a piece of network graphing software like this to draw a map like that of business interrelationships in the county, just as an example. The expertise is the knowledge that's buried in the accounting systems and back offices of all of our companies here. Would it be valuable to John in the port to actually say, wow, this one company we barely thought about is integral to how our economy works? That'd be really valuable to know. If they don't get that picture, they may never know that. So, ironically, it's about unlocking the value by making it more accessible to more people. There's a fascinating, we have a chief technology officer for the federal government now. I don't know if you knew that. We're talking about Fed. Todd Parks, lifelong entrepreneur, energetic guy, amazing and smart. And he took on this thing called healthcare.gov. And what they've started doing at a federal level is taking data and saying, here's the federal data, it's yours, you the people, right? Here's the data. If you can think of an interesting way to make this useful and valuable to people, knock yourselves out. And it's done astonishing things. You can go on a federal site, healthcare.gov, click on Washington, name your criteria for insurance, and it'll say, here's the policies and companies that provide them that might be of interest to you. And it's clear and it's usable because they had it done by entrepreneurs. The government's responsible for data. The entrepreneurs did the user interface. Thank you. It's a huge value add that was essentially locked up value instead. We got more data than we know what to do with. Making sense of it is the hardest part right now. Did that partially address your question?
Okay, we have lots of questions left, but we have very little time. So I want to thank you, Matthew, and please join me in thanking Matthew. Wonderful
Thank
presentation.
you. Honored to be here.
We have a little gift for you, Watcom Places, so you're close to nature in Sudden Valley, so here you go. Thank you so much again. And thank you all for coming. You're the reason we have these programs, and please join us July 25th with candidate for Governor Jay Inslee. Thanks again. Goodbye now.